nothing makes me more excited than seeing the big yellow thing in the sky. Nothing gives me more energy than the big yellow thing in the sky. It is a Sunday. I am going to school finally. School? That's not the word I was thinking. I'm going to film Sienna's long reining exercise video, which I've been meaning to do all week. In fact, I've got a long list of jobs to do because that thing up there makes me want to do them, which is great. So let's crack on. I wanted to quickly say, if you are long reining for the first time, or a young horse, or a spooky horse, or a horse you can't trust, do put a hat on, wear gloves, wear sensible footwear. I am not long reining Sienna with a hat on. I long rein her several times a week, every week. I'm very confident, as is she, and so I trust that she, hopefully, fingers crossed, isn't going to be cheeky or naughty, but obviously do what's right for you and your horse and what is safest. Oh, and she's covered in poo stains. I do know that. I'm going to give her a little wash afterwards. I just didn't want to work her being a bit wet, because she's covered. You're a messy pup, aren't you? Do you know what? Sometimes just getting to the point of actually filming an exercise takes ages. Because, for example, the dog's just come into the arena, which is fine, but the camera then picks up on the dog and doesn't focus on me and Sienna. Then the cat comes into the arena and the cat's trying to like rub up against Sienna's legs. Not a good idea. And then the dog won't leave the arena, and while I'm concentrating on the dog, Sienna's licking the camera. You're like, come on, right, this thing needs to get out as well. Go on now. They make it so complicated at times. They really do, don't they? They make it hard work. Right, we're nearly there. Now I have to unwind all my lunge lines that have somehow miraculously got themselves knotted up. Oh, and I've just lost Sienna. Oh, she's not going to like that. I've rested the lunge line over her back. Give me strength. Go and find the wolf. I have turned the volume down, guys, because as you can tell from the earlier clips, it was a rather windy day. How beautiful it was. The wind noise in the background makes these videos horrible. So I've got 3 pole layouts to show you that I like to long rein Sienna through. And within each layout, there's several different exercises you can do with your horse. You could ride them through this. You could walk them in hand, whatever suits you and your horse best. To start with, I've got these 3 poles in a line with obviously space between each. I'd have more poles if my arena was longer. The more the merrier. And I like to start off with doing like a bit of a serpentine through them. I think it's really good to do lots of changing of bend, changing the rein. Good for your horse's suppleness. You can see here that I have chosen to long rein Sienna in a saddle and a head collar. I mix it up all the time. I like the saddle on her because I think she can, if you don't put a saddle on for a while, she can get a little bit funny about having it back on. So it's good to work her in the saddle. The head collar, she tends to hold her head and neck in a better frame when she's got the head collar on. When she's got the bridle on with the bit in, she can be a little bit against the contact and a little bit kind of argumentative in her mouth. So I generally find she goes better in a head collar, just sometimes steering's a little bit harder. You can see here we've moved on to doing a few transitions within the poles. Again, really quite nice exercise to do with them. She's always hollowed going into a halt. It's something we've not sort of really managed to fix with Sienna, which is why it's just important to keep practicing it and just trying to persuade her to not bring her neck and head up too much. But you can see it's really nice to work on those halts in between the poles, and I like it when I've got like a specific place to do the halt. It makes me more accurate. Here I'm just playing around with the loops in between the poles. So sometimes I make them really shallow, other times I make them a lot more deeper, a bit more like a serpentine. Good to keep mixing it up, just to keep your horse concentrating. You don't want them getting bored. Then we move on to doing the serpentine and walking your horse over the poles. This is, again, really good exercise. Again, I really enjoy doing serpentine with the horses, constantly changing the bend. And then you've got the added bonus of asking them to walk over the poles as well. So nothing not to like about this exercise. And just like in the previous videos, you can mix up how deep or shallow you make your loops over the poles. Then I move on to doing a sort of figure of 8s over the poles. So again, just getting Sienna to do a circle over 2 poles, changing the bend, changing the rein, and doing then a circle through the poles the other direction. Again, it's all about changing that bend over the pole. I find as you change, the horses tend to pick their feet up a little bit more over the pole, make a little bit more effort. This is great for their suppleness, getting that bend through the rib cage and the neck. I really like the fact that she's starting to stretch down. She's looking at where she's putting her feet. Just a really good exercise. And to finish off this pole layout, I did an exercise where you ask your horse to halt over the pole. And the reason I love it is because when you ask the horse then to walk on out of the halt, they really tend to lift their hind legs a little bit more over the pole. So they make that little bit more effort. So it's a good exercise to practice. I should add, for that last exercise, you could also raise the poles to make it a little bit harder. Now we move on to my next pole layout. I don't really know what I'm calling this. It's a bit like a sweetie shape, maybe? I don't really know. Anyway, the reason I love this exercise is we've got some raised poles in it and we just got so many options. I really don't want to have to stop and start changing poles around mid-session. So this exercise gives me loads of options while I'm working Sienna. As you see, I've got raised poles. I can go through the narrow part of the sweetie. I can go through the slightly wider part. I can use the poles on the end to do kind of curved lines. I can keep changing up to get her to listen and focus. And you can see she's actually starting to drop her head a little bit more as we moved on into this exercise. You can do halts in the box. Again, really good for practicing those transitions, making sure that your horse is listening to you and that they stand still. I always think it's quite good to ask them to halt and then just stay put for a good few seconds. Your horse needs to learn to be patient. So play around with how long you ask them to stand for. So Sienna's just had a bit of a wipeout of the raised poles, knocking them both down. And the reason I say it's really important to do lots of transitions and make sure your horse is happy to stand is so you can put the poles back up. I've now moved on to doing a circle around the little square, and it's really good because I've obviously got a little bit of bend through her body, working on her suppleness. The horse tends to lift a little bit higher with their legs as they're stepping over the poles when they're curving. And actually this was quite hard because it was quite a small circle. So it really meant that I had to kind of make sure that Sienna didn't drift through the outside shoulder. So a good test of my long reining skills as well. And I like the fact that throughout this session, she was getting more relaxed, her neck was getting longer and more stretched out, and she was just looking softer and more rounded over the back. So all these pole layouts really do help create a better shape through your horse's body. So I filmed this on a different day. You can see much grayer this day. And I went for no saddle, but a bridle on. And you'll see that Sienna spends a fair amount of time tongue lolling and not being particularly happy in the bridle. She is much better in the head collar. I did it because, as you can see, I have got a square set out. And the reason I like long reining them around this square is it's an amazing way to really get them to engage their hindquarters. And they sort of nearly do a quarter pirouette around each corner. Really good exercise, but the horse will find it quite hard and they can sometimes get a little bit stuck. So I wanted the bridle on because it just meant I'd have a bit more feel to her bit and just help her with she went a bit off piece there, help a little bit more with the turns and so on. But she wasn't particularly happy about it. And as you know, we've got an ongoing issues with Sienna and still trying to sort out her problems, bless her. So she didn't find this exercise that hard, and it is quite a tricky one. And you can see once I've gone around the outside of the square, I then move on to coming inside the square and doing really very much a 10-metre circle, if not a tiny bit smaller. Are great for really working on a horse's bend. Also, they can't drift out, which is why it's so good. The horse can't sort of slip and fall throughout the shoulder and not do like a true bend through their ribcage and body. But interesting for Sienna, I could see just how stiff she was on the left rein. She was much better on the right. So it kind of highlighted some issues for me. And then I went to doing the corners of the squares. I've seen there's so many different things you can do with a simple square box. So you could do circles from these corners, or you could just do them in straight lines, but great way to get them to really lift with their feet. She got rather distracted about something in the distance. Just great ways to keep her focused and listening, and hopefully improving her core strength, improving the muscle over her back, and getting her to engage those hind quarters. But yes, you can see she's a lot more mouthy and just quite a bit tighter actually to her body compared to the previous video clips where she was in a head collar. So it was very interesting for me to watch this back and sort of thought, there's definitely some issues here. In fact, some of the clips I'm going to send to my vet so we can try to continue to figure out what exactly is going on with Sienna. You can obviously do some transitions within the box as well. The exercises are endless really, which is why I'm showing you guys. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and thank you for watching, and I will see you guys again very soon.